Welcome to the training course on the use of the online Concur expense reimbursement tool. This course has been designed to show you the basic functionality of the Concur software for use in submitting expense reimbursement reports. The main topics that will be covered are how to gain initial access and log into the program, what items to review or set up within your profile, how to build an expense reimbursement report, and how and to whom to submit the report. Please note that this training will cover the computer desktop version of the software and not the smartphone app. This training will also only cover functionality of the Concur system and not discuss what expenses are or are not reimbursable per the various union collective bargaining agreements. That information can be obtained by contacting your crewing administrator. So with that, let's get started. All Crowley employees are given a profile within the Concur system upon hire, usually once they receive their first paycheck. At this stage, if you have yet to receive login information for Concur, or have forgotten that information, you will need to email concurquestions@crowley.com. Please include your name and employee ID number to ensure that you receive the correct login credentials. Now, once you have received your username and password, you will go to the website www.concurrsolutions.com to log in. You'll enter your username here, your password in this field, and then select Sign In. The very first time that you log in, you may be prompted to change your password. You will have to ensure that the password you create meets the criteria the system tells you. At least 7 characters, it must contain at least a letter and a number, it has to be upper and lowercase characters, and include a symbol. You get the idea. Once you do this, you should then find yourself on this main page. Now, the Concur system is not only used for expense reimbursement at Crowley, but also it is the system we use to book company travel. So this dashboard, you will see some things like over here on the left where if you have any trips that have been booked by Crowley for you, they would show up here. There's some other quick links to be able to start an expense report, or down here you could see if you have any open expense reports. But before we get too much into detail about this expense part of the system, let's first cover a few things within the profile page. So to do this, you select Profile and then Profile Settings. Once to this Profile Options page, select Personal Information. While most of the critical information found on this page has been pre-populated, there are just a few items you should review and potentially update before using the system. If you find errors in any of the information that has been pre-populated, do not change it yourself. In fact, you'll see often you don't even have the option to change these fields yourself. Instead, contact your crewing administrator to have it corrected. Since Concur is the system we use for company travel, it is especially important to verify your name is correct and matches the photo identification you will present at the airport when traveling. The next item to check and potentially update is your personal email address. And we will find that section about halfway down the page. Right here, email addresses. If you find that your email address is missing, follow the directions under the How Do I Add an Email Address FAQ, right here. This section is nice in that it has a few of these FAQ questions that if you click on, they give you step-by-step instructions of how to do things. You'll also want to verify your email address using these instructions, mainly so that you can send receipts for reimbursement directly to the system via email. We will cover this in more detail when we get to the expense report section of the training. The next section to look at is Travel Preferences, which is a little further down the page. This section is where you can notate travel discounts you may be eligible for, right here, as well as any preferences you have for various travel arrangements. Here's air travel, hotel preferences, car rental preferences. Please note that these are preferences only and not a guarantee that you will receive these accommodations when receiving company-provided travel arrangements. You also have the option to enter any frequent traveler programs you participate in right here, such as a frequent flyer program. We also highly recommend that you add, further down here, any TSA pre-check information or passport information if you have either of these items. The last section to cover is the credit card section at the very bottom. Please do not input your personal credit card information here into the system. If you do so, it will be your credit card that will be charged for any company travel booked for you, and that's not what we want. This section is really meant for employees who are issued company credit cards only. So now at this point, you can select any Save button to save your changes. However, I didn't actually make any changes in this user account, so I'm going to just click Go to the top, and I'm going to click this SAP Concur, and that will take me back to the home page. Now we're ready to cover the actual process for building an expense report. So from this home page, you will select Expense at the top. This screen is the starting point for managing your travel and other reimbursable expenses. There are three sections: Report Library, Available Expenses, and Available Receipts. The top section under Report Library is where you'll go to create a new expense report. But before we cover that, let's talk about receipts first. There are multiple options on how to load them into the system. The first is via email. You can send receipts to receipts@crowley.com, and if you are sending the receipts from the email address that you verified in your profile, the receipt will show in the bottom section under Available Receipts. They would show right here. Another option is to save the file or the receipt image to a folder on your computer and then select Upload Receipt Image. It'll bring up this folder of your computer, and then just search whatever file that you save your receipts to or whatever location on your computer, and just select that receipt, open it, and it'll put it right here. The final option is to wait and input the receipts once you are working within the expense report itself, and I will show you that when we get to that point. So let's go ahead and create a report by selecting the Create New Report button at the top. The first thing you'll have to do is to create the report header information here. Anytime throughout this expense report process that you see a field that has a red star next to it, that means it's a required field that must be completed in order to continue. On this screen, it's the report name and crew vessels fields that must be filled out. The report name is freeform, which means you can name the report whatever you want. However, I find it helpful to put either the time frame the expenses are from or what event they are associated with if possible. For example, we could put May 2018 expenses, or we could put ATB Pride 2018 Shipyard, or you could put 2018 Crew Seminar. You get the idea. The vessel field, as you can see, is a drop-down. And this one, you want to make sure that you always select the last vessel that you sailed on or were crewed onto, regardless what the expenses are actually from. So let's say Admiral. Then you select the Create Report button at the bottom. And here we are, within your newly created 2018 Crew Seminar Expense Report. So let's start adding expenses to submit for reimbursement. In order to do that, you'll select this Add button, and then Create New Expense. You can see the list of expense types below that you have to choose from. Common expense types are, we've got baggage fees, crew training, meals are pretty common, sometimes airfare, mileage is very common, and even transportation if you have to take a taxi or have road tolls, ferry fees, that kind of thing. However, remember that the rules for what expenses you are or are not reimbursed for can be found in your applicable collective bargaining agreement, and they vary by union, fleet, etc. Contact your crewing administrator for more information on how to find out these rules. So let's go ahead and show you how to add some common expense types to your report. Let's start with mileage. So you'll want to select this Car Mileage Crew 2018, since our dummy report was from 2018. You will again notice the red stars notating the required fields. Each expense type will have different required fields. For mileage, you'll need to fill in the transaction date, the from location and to location, and then payment type will always default to other, just leave that as is. All the other fields on this expense type are optional. However, it is helpful to the end approver of the report if you identify either in the comment field here or the business purpose field whether the trip was for a training class or shipyard work or normal vessel work. In our example, we obviously identified that these expenses were for a crew seminar, but there could very well be cases where you have multiple expenses from different events that you're putting all in one report, which is fine. In those cases, you're going to want to identify, hey, this trip was actually for, crew seminar. Just helpful when it comes to approve it on the back end. This is going to be the case with any expense type you choose, not just mileage. So now I'll go ahead and fill in the required fields. I'll just pick a random date. The from and to location are free form, so you don't necessarily have to put the exact street address. I mean, that could be helpful, but I'm just going to say I had to go from my home in Seattle to the class in Tacoma. The distance traveled does not calculate based on what you put here, so it may be helpful to give the approver some more information. So you can say trip from home to school down here in the comments. The general rule of thumb at Crowley is that we will reimburse the distance that's the most direct route between the 2 points, but again, each union contract may be slightly different. So finally, the distance traveled isn't a required field, but if you want to get any money back, you're going to want to put the distance that you traveled. Again, most likely the most direct route. So I will put, I don't know exactly what it is from Seattle to Tacoma, but let's say it was 30 miles. Now the final option that you have is you can enter round trip mileage if you choose instead of doing a separate expense entry for every leg of the trip. However, if you do this, so let's say I'll double it, it was actually 60 to get there and back, you're going to want to note that this is round trip mileage in the comments. So I'll put round trip from home to school and back, or you get the idea. So now that you're finished everything, you can select Save Expense. Now it gives you this alert saying that there's still missing information that's required. You just select Yes. The reason it does that was because when we hit Save initially, the transaction amount wasn't in there. It had to calculate it for the system to think, oh, this expense has everything filled out it needs to. So as you can see, the system took your 60 miles, applied the applicable reimbursement rate, usually based on the IRS's rate, and populated the transaction amount of $32.40. So you just hit save again. We don't need receipts for mileage, which is nice. And then here you are. You've got car mileage 2018, the date, and the amount you requested. Before we go into another example and add another expense, I want to point out that the system auto-saves the report after each expense is added. So you can leave this screen or the system at any time and come back to edit and finish the report later if you want to. So if I was to jump to the main screen, not only do you see here on the dashboard that you've got an open report you're working on, but if you go to the Manage Expenses starting screen, you'll see the report here as well in a not submitted status. So you select this box, it opens up the report, and you can start working on it again where you left off. So back to expenses. Meals is another very common expense type, so let's hit Add and then Create New Expense. So the type to choose for meals, regardless if they were had during a training class or any other event, is crew meals and food, shipbound crew and camp. I've got it listed here under recently used expense types, but you'll also find it here under meals. Now there may be times when you wish to request to receive a per diem amount for an event, and that's fine if your union contract allows that. However, do not select per diem meal Ocean Ranger unless you are in fact working as an Ocean Ranger. Per diem for any other fleet should be requested using the crew meals and food choice right here. So let's go ahead and select that. So for this expense, the required fields are transaction date, vendor name, city, state, and transaction amount. So I'll go ahead and put transaction date, just going to pick one, vendor name, could be anything. I ate it in the Golden Arches. Hopefully you're eating nicer than that. But then city state's a little bit different than what we saw under mileage. So in city state, not only will you, once you click on that field, see if you've got any recent places, but if you once you start typing a city, you'll see all these choices to select. You're going to want to actually use your cursor to select the correct city-state combination. If you spell this wrong or get this field wrong, it will create an error. So that field works just a little bit differently. Again, it helps if you add a comment noting what this meal was for, what event, if you didn't already have it notated in the title of the expense report. I'll go ahead, just if I could type, do that. So the last action to take, I should put the transaction amount in, can't forget that. I spent $12 at McDonald's. So the last thing you'll want to do is to attach a receipt. Meals is an expense type where receipts are required. So I'll go ahead and attach a receipt by clicking Attach Receipt Image. So select this. If you've already uploaded receipts into the system, you'll see them listed in this pop-up screen. Or if you have not previously uploaded any receipts to Concur, you can do so now by selecting Upload Receipt Image and searching for the images on your computer. So here's one called Meals. I'll go ahead and select that, hit Open. It'll take a minute and then it'll be available for you to select, and then select Attach button in the bottom right of the pop-up. Now, if you're submitting reimbursement for per diem where receipts may not be required under your union contract, the Concur system is still going to require something to be attached to the expense entry, or else you will not be able to submit the report. Let me show you what I mean. I won't actually attach the receipt for this example. I'm just going to X out of here. If I save this expense without a receipt, you'll see at the top of the screen, and next to the expense entry, an alert will appear. If you go over to the far right, click this down arrow, you'll see for the expense entry, crew meals for this $12, you must attach a receipt image to this expense. So to do that, you go back in here under Crew, just select the expense, and go ahead, hit Attach Receipt Image, and attach the receipt. Now, for per diem, you'll need to create some sort of a document to attach. So a note that dates the reasons for the per diem and when and the amount needed, you can attach that. So if I upload, here's one that I created as an example for per diem. Again, we'll give the system a minute to upload it. As you can see here, it's just a picture of a handwritten note that says requesting per diem amount, $35 per day for crew seminar attended June 1st through 5th, total amount $175. So anything like that to be able to attach to the expense type would be fine. Obviously for this example, they no longer match with the vendor name and the dollar amount, so you'd obviously want to make sure that all this information is correct. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and save the expense so you can see those alerts disappear. And here they are, they're gone. The next expense type we'll look at is baggage fees. So again, create new expense, baggage fees. Some of your required fields are pretty similar. Let's say this was a different trip that we took. I got to search the vendor. Flew on Delta. I flew to Anchorage. Anchorage doesn't like it. There it is. See, it wanted a capital A. It's very finicky. Anchorage, Alaska. My baggage fees were $25. And you can put number of bags, but again, this one maybe was for vessel crew up. I know it doesn't match with our example report title, but again, just want to reiterate, it helps if you put more information is better than less. This is one that again requires a receipt. I've got a lovely baggage one here, and I want to attach it. Save expense. With baggage fees, just want to caution you to make sure that you're attaching the actual baggage receipt and not a boarding pass. There's still airlines out there where both of these items look very similar. So that's just something to be on the lookout when it comes to airline baggage fees. Another expense type that's very common, we'll show you here, is the general kind of transportation things. So other than airfare or mileage or rental cars, this is used often for ground transportation such as taxis or car services, or items such as road tolls or ferry fees. The required fields are very similar to other expense types, and again, you'll need to attach receipts. All of that works the same way, so I'm not actually going to do this one. I'll cancel out of it. So the last expense type that I kind of want to go into in a little bit of detail is crew training. Now, for those of you where 99.9% of your training is accomplished either through your union school or through company-sponsored classes or seminars, you'll likely never use this expense type. However, for those of you without a union school, who may end up taking and paying for training classes on your own, say for license upgrade as an example. This is the expense type you will select to receive reimbursement for the class costs or tuition you paid for the training. So I'll go ahead and select that. Again, you got to make sure you fill out all the required fields, and receipts are going to be required for this expense. So for transaction date, it's likely fine if you just pick the first date of the class, if it's a multi-day long class. Everything else here, it's similar. Some of the required fields aren't the same as with other travel expenses, but you're going to have to put the amount. Say the class is $500. It also is probably helpful if you say what the class is. I'm just going to pretend it's radar observer. So I'll go over here, attach a receipt. I'm going to do one that says training. Also, if you're submitting these costs for training that's required for upgrade, you'll need to attach copies of your new MMC showing the upgraded license or endorsement. So you'll need to have that included as well as the receipts that show the cost of the training. So if I save expense, we should be done with that one. Now, throughout this training, you've seen me attach images that aren't actual receipts. They're just example dummy pieces of paper that I created. The system would let you submit receipts with anything, but just know that any approver, if you're not attaching the correct receipt or something that clearly matches and is legible, able to be read, it's probably not going to get approved. So you want to make sure that you're doing the right things. Now that we've covered how to select and add some common expense types, let's go over some other basic tools and features of the report. The first helpful tool is the Copy button, which allows you to copy an expense once you have created it. This can be a time saver if you have multiple expenses of a similar type, such as mileage or meals. You simply check the box on the left of the expense you wish to copy, and then these other buttons become available. You select the one called Copy. You will see an identical expense created, except with a different date. Usually it defaults to one date following the expense you copied. So our first expense was on June 4th. And the new one populated everything the same except for June 5th. You've also noticed for meals you got an alert. And I'm sure most of you have guessed it's that there's no receipt. So while the expense type and all its information copied, it did not bring the receipt with it. So for meals you would want to select this new one that was just copied. If it's the second date, that's great, but maybe you're like, I didn't go to McDonald's the next day. I really got fancy and I went to Taco Bell on the second day. Sorry, just a little bit of fast food humor. But there I spent $15. Big spender. Again, you're going to need to select a receipt. Potentially you have a different one specifically for Taco Bell. Hit attach. You can make any other changes you need to make sure that the information is correct. Hit Save Expense. The other item to cover is various alerts. Some alerts we've already covered. We saw them up here at the top. Mainly they were missing receipt alerts. However, another common alert is old transaction dates. While most alerts must be fixed in order to submit, old transaction is an exception and will not prevent you from submitting the report. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say this crew training class you took happened 6 months ago and it's taken you a while to get your license processed and upgraded. So now that you're able to submit the expense for reimbursement, you're going to see an alert that says transaction date is greater than 90 days. Please be more timely in your expense submissions. If you see this alert, you can still submit your report. In fact, Crowley actually prefers that you wait to submit a report until you reach a minimum of $50 if you can, even if it means waiting a little bit longer to submit it. So once you've finished adding all your expenses and have cleared as many alerts as you can, you're ready to submit your report. To do this, you select the orange Submit Report button in the top right, and then you will hit Submit Report again when the pop-up box appears. You will then need to select the approver using the search function. So most of the time your approver will be your crewing administrator. However, if the expenses are related to a training event, you will want to select the appropriate training administrator. If a report contains expenses for both work and training expenses, Simply pick one or the other to send the report to. Approvers have the ability to review certain expenses and then forward the report to another approver to review the remaining expenses. This is another reason why it is so important to identify in the comments for each expense where the expense was incurred. So typically I could try to search by last name. Because this is a test user account, it's not going to actually allow me to select anybody or in fact submit this report. So, but for you, you could search by last name, you could search by their first name, if you know their email address. You've got a few different options to find your crewing or training administrator. Once you've selected them, you would hit Submit Report. See, again, the travel, this test account won't let me do it, but for you, it should. So under your account, once you have selected an authorized approver and hit Submit, the system will jump you to the Manage Expenses page, and your report will no longer be in a not submitted status, it'll be in a submitted status. The approver at this point has 3 calendar days to review and take action on the report. Please note that this is calendar days, not business days, so therefore it includes the day of submittal as well as weekends. Therefore, submitting a report late on a Friday night is not very helpful and will likely cause delays for you to receive payment. If the approver does not act on the report within the 3-day time frame, it rolls up to their manager for approval. This is a huge improvement over the old paper process as it adds accountability and assurances that the reports will be processed in a timely manner. That said, at this point the approver then has 2 options. They can either approve the report as is, or return the report to you if there's a problem with it. If they need to return the report to you, the approver should provide comments explaining the reason why they did so and what needs to be fixed on your end. You can always, of course, contact them directly if you have any questions. Also, if you've added your email address into the system, you'll receive various notifications as your report moves through the various stages. So not only a notification will come via email if the approver has to return the report to you, but you should also receive notifications when the report gets approved, when it gets extracted for payment and the money is going to be on its way to you, ideally via direct deposit. This concludes the training course on the use of the online Concur expense reimbursement tool. You should now have a basic understanding of the functionality of the Concur software for use in submitting expense reimbursement reports. You now have the knowledge to gain initial access and log into the program, review and set up important items within your profile, build an expense reimbursement report, and submit the report. Don't forget to reach out to your crewing or training administrator at any time for assistance in using the system. Thank you.